At the upscale restaurant invited by my daughter-in-law Brianna, I stood up to wash my hands before the meal and, as I was heading back to the private room, I overheard Brianna's voice through the slightly open door.
"Oh, and O'Neill makes over $100,000 a year. But he's so stingy."
It sounded like she was complaining to someone on the phone.
"The wife doesn't have inheritance rights?" "I know. But what belongs to the in-laws belongs to the wife. If she's saving it up, I should use it for her."
I was astonished. I had hoped to get along with the bright and lively daughter-in-law, who was the complete opposite of me. I now felt pity for myself for thinking that way. As I ruminated, anger began to rise within me. I couldn't forgive her. I bit my lip. I was going to expose everything she had been doing in secret. She better be prepared. I am Arya, a 67-year-old housewife. I had worked part-time for many years but retired after a serious illness. With the inheritance from my late husband, who passed away 5 years ago, and my pension, I could live comfortably as long as I didn't indulge too much. Now, I attend a choir practice 3 times a week, which, along with tending to the garden, is my modest enjoyment. I was concerned that my eldest son was still single, but last year he married Brianna I met at a party and started a family. She's a bit flashy but cheerful and beautiful. Apparently, they had secretly been seeing each other for about a year. To my surprise, she had proposed to him with a reverse proposal.
"I fell in love with your honest nature. Marry me."
My son, who works for a large company and has a high income, accepted her wish to retire from work with pleasure. She plans to return to part-time work once they have children and start incurring educational expenses. They are both in their 30s. I thought they might be pushing it if they wanted to start trying for children now, but I swallowed my words, assuming they had their reasons. They purchased a high-rise condominium about a 15-minute drive away and visit during the summer, New Year, and long holidays. They help with garden maintenance, accompany me on shopping trips, and visit ancestral graves, which is very helpful. I had believed that we would continue to maintain a good distance. That was until that incident occurred. Brianna's hobby seems to be food tours. From her slim figure and beautiful face, it was hard to imagine, but she has a body that doesn't gain weight no matter how much she eats. She visits popular restaurants and famous hotels for lunch, according to what I heard. Despite being a full-time housewife, her hobby is eating out. I wondered if she was spending my son's earnings on transportation and food costs, but then I thought she might be using her savings, so I stopped the unnecessary speculation. Then, a month later, Brianna invited me to lunch. We met at the location, and I followed her into a stylish restaurant.
This place was featured on a gourmet show. The croquettes are exquisite. Even the celebrities praised them.
Is that so? It's a pity I can't eat them. When the staff came to take orders and I ordered the pork sandwich set, Brianna showed visible displeasure.
"Arya, at your age, are you still picky about food?"
"No, I have a shellfish allergy."
"What?"
Brianna's eyes widened in surprise. "It's an allergy to crab and shrimp. Eating them causes hives and stomach pain. It suddenly appeared when I became an adult."
"If it's just that, wouldn't it get better if you keep eating?"
"No, it can cause breathing difficulties and be life-threatening."
"Oh, that sounds troublesome."
I was irritated by her words, but more so, I was stunned by her lack of knowledge. I had thought she would be more informed since she was younger. Perhaps she lacked knowledge because she didn't have children. However, this wasn't the end of it. Brianna seemed unwilling to remember my allergy. No matter how many times I mentioned it, she would immediately forget and suggest crab or shrimp. When we went out to eat with my son, she would order shrimp tempura without asking, or when we were invited to her home, she would serve shrimp gratin for dinner.
Brianna, Mom has a shellfish allergy. Crab and shrimp are a no-go.
The son gently admonished her, and Brianna would look sad and sigh.
I made this for her with such effort.
Sorry about that.
I'll eat it later.
We repeated such conversations many times. Then, as we were leaving, the son would apologize.
Sorry, Mom. Brianna is forgetful. I've been helped so many times by her cheerful personality that I can't be upset with her.
I'm sorry too. When my son bowed his head, I couldn't complain. Each time, I forced a smile and apologized even though I was not at fault. After a year, Brianna had finally remembered my shellfish allergy and began frequently inviting me out to eat. The busy son often dined with colleagues and juniors, so he likely left me alone to avoid eating alone. Although I was glad for the invitations, she would often come unexpectedly, which was troubling. Even though I had retired, I still had my own plans. Especially on choir practice days, which are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and also on weekends or holidays if there were upcoming performances or music events. I had to send her away. So, I wanted her to call before coming. Despite my repeated reminders, she always showed up unannounced. The other day, I was scolded loudly at the entrance.
Which is more important to you, me or the choir?
It almost slipped out that the choir was more important. I held back my response and instead smiled vaguely. Sorry. I started the car engine. Of course, I try to accommodate her as much as possible when I have no other plans. However, Brianna's choice of restaurants was always high-end, often featured on TV or in magazines. Although I was glad to be invited, I couldn't let Brianna pay, so I had to cover the bill. When the check came, Brianna would show the staff her phone hanging around her neck.
Please add the points.
So, every time, I would pay for the meal, and she would collect points on my money. When I vented to a friend, they suspected I was bragging about my happy life. It's enviable that you have such a sweet daughter-in-law who invites you to eat out. It seemed odd to me that several $100s were spent every month on dining out. However, since I wasn't struggling financially and considering it as interaction with my daughter-in-law, it was hard to refuse. These conflicting feelings gradually accumulated. One day, I received a call from Brianna. Expecting another dining invitation, I answered and heard her excited voice.
Aria, I heard you won the prefectural choir competition?
She must have heard it from my son. I couldn't hide my prideful tone. Yes. We're going to the national competition.
That's great. How impressive.
Thank you. I smiled. It was always nice to hear congratulatory words. Then Brianna made a surprising suggestion.
Since it's a special occasion, why don't we celebrate at a nice restaurant? Of course, it will be on us.
That sounds lovely. But are you sure? You don't have to go out of your way. Although she usually dined at high-end places, hearing her mention a nice restaurant made me anxious, thinking she might choose a celebrity-frequented spot.
It's fine. How about a restaurant near the next station?
I hesitated for a moment. Noticing my hesitation, Brianna laughed and said,
I heard from a friend that the restaurant there serves delicious dishes besides crab. I'll send you some images now, so please let me know what you think.
Okay. With a notification sound from my phone, images from Brianna arrived. I gazed at them and swallowed hard. Grilled eel, simmered duck, domestic beef steak. The luxurious and refined dishes looked very appetizing. Thinking I could probably eat these, I sent a reply saying, "This looks good," and received a smiley stamp with the response, "We'll make a reservation for the three of us." Though I had celebrated with my choir friends, it was unexpected to be celebrated by family as well. My negative impression of Brianna faded, and I eagerly awaited the day. On the agreed day, I met Brianna in front of the station.
O'Neill will be late due to overtime. He said to start eating when the food arrives.
Got it. It's tough to work on holidays. As we walked along the glamorous street lined with dining establishments, a refined-looking restaurant with an aura of exclusivity appeared. It was the reserved restaurant. After entering and introducing ourselves, we were shown to a private room. The room, decorated with a hanging scroll and a view of the garden through the window, had a charming atmosphere.
Are you okay with the bathroom?
Yes, I'll go first. I placed my bag down and got up. I had informed Brianna about my frequent trips to the bathroom due to after effects of an illness I had several years ago. Upon returning from washing my hands and trying to enter the private room, I heard Brianna's voice through a slightly open fusuma door.
Oh, and you know, O'Neill makes over $100,000 a year, but he's so stingy.
I couldn't believe my ears. It sounded like she was complaining to someone on the phone. Holding my breath behind the fusuma, I strained to listen.
The wife doesn't have inheritance rights? I know. But what belongs to the in-laws belongs to the wife. If she's saving it up, I should use it for her.
Someone gently tapped me on the shoulder. Swallowing a scream, I turned around to see a woman standing with her finger on her lips. It was the proprietress of the restaurant I had seen in the official video. She gestured towards the private room and entered first. The proprietress, closing the fusuma with her beautifully manicured fingers, looked at me with a tense expression and said, "Ms. Blanco, you must leave immediately." Eh? The proprietress continued with a serious expression, not changing her demeanor. "It's unreasonable to expect you to trust me on our first meeting. But everything I'm about to tell you is the truth." Well, actually, Ms. Brianna Blanco and a friend of mine visited our restaurant before. The proprietress then told me what she had overheard during that visit. I listened in disbelief, gradually feeling a surge of anger as I absorbed the shocking details. Brianna had been scheming from the start. I couldn't forgive her. I clenched my lips. I was going to expose everything she had been secretly planning. She should be prepared. Shaken by the proprietress's story, I left the private room and headed straight for the entrance, leaving the restaurant. On the way back, I reported the incident to the police and felt a bit reassured after their advice. Once home, I contacted Brianna, pretending to be unaware of what had happened. I'm sorry. I wasn't feeling well, so I had to leave early.
Oh, that messes up the plans? No, never mind.
Her hasty attempt to cover up seemed to confirm the truth of the proprietress's story. I was somewhat surprised by my own disappointment. It seemed I had hoped to believe in her more than I realized. I'm truly sorry. I'll make it up to you by treating you to a meal at another restaurant.
Understood.
After ending the call with Brianna, I dialed another number and shared the details of our conversation. A week later, I called Brianna. I suggested with as much regret as I could muster. I'm really sorry about what happened. How about a meal at a popular steakhouse as a gesture of apology?
Oh, did you manage to get a reservation there? Yay!
I could hear Brianna's excitement over the phone.
What's going on?
A young man's voice suddenly came through the phone. It seemed there was someone with Brianna.
We're getting a free meal at that famous restaurant.
Really? That's awesome.
Brianna, is that a friend with you?
Oh, yes. I'm having dinner with a friend. Please let me know once the details are set. I'm looking forward to it.
After the call ended, I held my phone for a while, whispering to myself with a grin. I'm really looking forward to it. A month later, I arrived at the restaurant with Brianna exactly at the meeting time. The atmosphere was cool and stylish, different from the traditional restaurant we had been to before. When we entered the private room, Brianna looked puzzled. A table for 4? Are 2 more people coming? I smiled and replied. Yes, I invited some acquaintances. One of them is someone you know well. Oh, I'll go to the bathroom first. As before, I placed my bag in the room, got up, and returned to the room. Although Brianna had been concerned about other customers, she seemed to become completely absorbed in the luxurious food that was soon served. Her eyes lit up, and she licked her lips.
I might have never had this pork before. The coating is so crispy. The fat is also delicious. It's totally different from the cheap restaurants.
The vegetable soy milk dish is also delicious with its rich flavor. Just as we were about to enjoy the main dish of beef, there was a light knock, and the wooden door opened. Brianna, who was poking at the vivid crimson beef with her chopsticks, reflexively looked towards the entrance and gasped.
Mark, what are you doing here?
Didn't you call me here? You said you'd give me the best beef.
I don't know. Who's that woman?
Standing next to the young man was the proprietress from the restaurant we had visited previously.
I didn't call him. Hey, Kiera, explain yourself.
The proprietress, stepping forward from the anxious Mark, bowed gracefully. Nice to meet you, Ms. Brianna. I'm Kiera Davidson, Mark's ex-girlfriend. Thank you for visiting our restaurant twice.
Oh, yes, you're the proprietress from the restaurant we went to recently.
Yes, Mark asked me to come here.
So, what does Mark's ex want?
Brianna, looking impatient to get back to her meal, furrowed her brows and questioned the proprietress. I wanted to inform you of something. The conversation you had at our restaurant the other day was overheard outside. Brianna and Mark turned pale instantly.
You were still at that place? I didn't know you had become the proprietress. And eavesdropping on customers is unprofessional.
The door was slightly open, so I tried to close it. That's when I overheard a disturbing conversation. It's still careless of you. Facing the shaken couple, the proprietress took out her cell phone and swiped the screen. Amidst the noise, Brianna and Mark's conversation was heard.
I found a notebook with the pin at the in-laws' house. I saw it and it's all set.
You're so careless.
You wouldn't expect family to be snooping around. I couldn't find the bank card, but if I know the PIN, I can transfer it to my account.
Brianna and Mark looked down, fidgeting.
Arya always goes to the bathroom, so I'll take the chance to grab her credit card. I'll also slip something in her drink to put her to sleep and order a mountain of food for myself. Arya might get arrested for not paying. How hilarious.
The content was so vile it made me feel dizzy. To think someone like this was married to my son.
I need to get all of father-in-law's inheritance. I'll max out the credit card too.
Even though you're rich, you live like a pauper, right? You're definitely hoarding money.
The proprietress spoke sternly to the standing Brianna and Mark, who were staring blankly.
Arya, who has an allergy, is always careful to avoid crab and shrimp in her food. So, she wouldn't notice if the drink tasted a little different.
I felt a deep sense of emptiness realizing my allergy had been exploited. I had been truly happy when I heard that Brianna would celebrate the choirs in national competition.
Did you even record it?
Mark muttered softly, and Brianna, glaring at the proprietress, retorted.
Recording customers' conversations is an invasion of privacy.
It's to prevent crimes. I wanted to stop you from taking money from customers like me due to Mark's actions. So, you've been doing this kind of thing for a while. Glaring at Brianna and Mark, Brianna squirmed and began to make excuses in a sweet voice.
No, it's not like that. Mark was troubled by this woman's advances, so I just gave her a hard time. And I haven't done anything to you. The conversation with Mark was just a joke.
Is that so? Oh, I'm sorry. I stood up and deliberately stumbled, kicking Brianna's bag that was placed at my feet. Contents spilled out of the open bag. I spotted my card among the items Brianna was frantically trying to pick up and swiftly grabbed it, holding it high. Oh, why is my card coming out of Brianna's bag? How strange. What about this crumpled, folded note? Slip a large amount of sleeping pills into the old lady's drink, make her fall asleep, then slip away and withdraw the inheritance from the ATM. The savings in that family will be mine. This is clearly a criminal plan. The paper spread out on the table showed Brianna's messy handwriting. Mark, holding his forehead, groaned.
Damn it, why are you carrying that around?
I just forget quickly. I forgot to throw it away.
Despite the overwhelming evidence, Brianna, instead of admitting defeat, pointed a finger at me and started to retaliate angrily.
It's Arya's fault in the first place.
What? Me?
Yes, you're the one who instilled stingy ideas into my husband, so I'm the one suffering.
With my eyebrows raised in confusion, Brianna twisted her pretty face into a scowl and continued to shout.
O'Neill, despite being a manager at a big company and rich, says he manages the household finances himself. My allowance is only $1,000 a month. It's too little.
I think that's a sufficient amount for a housewife. Brianna snapped back at the astonished proprietress.
Where's the sufficiency in that? O'Neill told me to save from that, but it disappears once I visit fancy restaurants and get beauty treatments. And Mark keeps asking me for food.
It's not my fault. It's your fault for cheating with an unprofitable host.
Mark shrugged his shoulders. Hey Brianna, you fell for O'Neill's honesty and proposed to him, right? I asked impulsively, and Brianna twisted her lips into a smirk.
That's obviously a lie. I was attracted by his money and future prospects. If I married him, I could eat high-end food without working. But he turned out to be stingy after we got married. What a disappointment.
Mark, with his arms crossed, nodded deeply.
When I searched for the bank book at the in-laws' house, there were lots of zeros lined up.
Exactly. Since it's there, I should use it quickly. We're family now. What's wrong with using family money?
I felt drained. I lost the energy to be angry. I felt pity for myself for having hoped for a bright and lively daughter-in-law who was the complete opposite of my own personality. I wondered what O'Neill, who was listening through the door, was feeling. As I began to regret today's plan, the door quietly opened, and O'Neill entered the room.
I see.
O'Neill, who had muttered briefly, looked at the astonished Brianna and Mark and said coldly,
So, you've been diligently giving the money I earned through hard work to this person?
No, that's not it. I just treated him to good food because he didn't have money. And also, I provided financial support for living expenses.
It's the same thing. Well, I guess I'm also at fault for not seeing through Brianna's true nature.
With a sigh, O'Neill decisively said,
Let's get a divorce. Please move out of the apartment by tomorrow.
What? Wait. Where should I go if I'm kicked out of the tower apartment? I'll be in trouble. I won't be able to eat good food anymore.
Panicked, Brianna turned to O'Neill with pleading eyes and a pitiful voice.
I'm sorry. I'll reflect on my actions, so please spare me the divorce. I'll also break up with Mark.
Don't you think it's too late to be so self-serving? Get a divorce and start working for yourself.
No, I don't want to. It's fun to live luxuriously on my husband's money. Money earned by myself is meaningless.
O'Neill, looking exasperated by Brianna's response, shook his head.
Then why don't you remarry another wealthy person? Though, it seems like there are some things you need to take care of first.
Huh?
Excuse us.
A male voice rang out as the door opened, and two stern-looking men entered the room.
We're the police. Brianna Blanco and Mark Heyer, you are suspected of committing a crime of drugging and robbery. Please come with us to the station.
Shown their police badges, Brianna and Mark, with their mouths agape, seemed unable to grasp the situation.
Why are you here waiting for us?
I called them.
Though this time it was an attempt, it seems you have other offenses. Kiera, We need to check the recorded audio on the phone, so we'll borrow it.
Brianna and Mark, seemingly lacking the courage to protest, were quietly led away. I went to apologize to the restaurant staff and the manager for causing a disturbance. I had actually reserved the entire restaurant so as not to inconvenience other customers. O'Neill, the proprietress, and I sat down and resumed our meal. We enjoyed everything from the main steak to the dessert, including the portions that Brianna and Mark would have had, leaving the restaurant feeling both our stomachs and hearts satisfied. When the police investigated Brianna and Mark, they discovered many additional crimes. They had used their partner's credit cards without permission, drugged them to obtain their PINs, and stolen money from bank accounts. It turned out that their method was to find targets while working, then quit their jobs and move to another place after stealing money. There had been reports of the victims, but with no concrete evidence and their frequent moves within the country, it had been difficult to catch them. This time, however, they were finally caught. The two were sentenced together, and O'Neill and Brianna went through a divorce. 5 years later, when Brianna was released from prison, she would have to pay alimony to O'Neill. After deducting the value of the tower apartment and car from the property division, her remaining assets amounted to $20,000, a terrifying sum for someone who finds it hard to work diligently. I hope Brianna will reflect on her actions and live a decent life from now on. Given how shocked O'Neill must have been by this incident, I intentionally avoided touching on it. Immediately afterward, he was deeply depressed, saying, "I created a chance for them to take advantage of me because I was preoccupied with work. I also caused trouble for Mom." However, after being recognized for his work in managing a new project, he gradually regained his spirits. 3 years later, he brought his fiancée to the family home, a gentle and modest woman. Since she was a former classmate whom he had reconnected with at a high school reunion, her background was trustworthy, which was a relief. I sincerely hope O'Neill finds happiness this time. Since the incident, I've occasionally met and chatted with the proprietress. Despite being younger, we share similar tastes in books and movies, so we get along well. I continued to socialize with her by reserving her restaurant for the choir's post-performance party and inviting her to our recitals. Though we only placed 5th in the national competition, we now have a new goal to make it within the top 3 next time. I want to continue living modestly while enjoying my hobbies and social interactions, living a life true to myself.